Hi, I'm Danny and these are my Diecast Disasters. In this video I'm going to be customizing a Hot Wheels Custom 62 Chevy. This casting was released in 2008. I got this black and purple version in a Flames 5-pack from 2018. And the paint job looks pretty cool, but that horrible pink windscreen totally ruins it. There's no way I'm going to be able to make that look cool, so I'm going to be ditching it and customizing my Chevy truck in a post-apocalyptic style with some old fuel barrels and some sort of toxic waste barrels. So here I've drilled out those two posts and taken it all apart. There's the offending windscreen. Before I strip the paint off it, I'm going to use my Dremel to cut some dents into it. I start out with a round burr. There we go, that's the bulk of the dents cut out, and then I move on to a straight burr and make some of them a bit sharper or deeper and make some smaller dents. And there we have all my dent carving finished. The next thing I did was to use some paint stripper to remove all the paint off of the casting. Here it is after paint stripping. And now I'll give it a bit of a tidy up with the wire brush on my rotary tool. Get rid of those remaining scraps of paint and the oxidation off the casting. There we go, it's looking a bit cleaner. Don't have to worry about every last scrap of paint. And next I put in a mesh windscreen there. And lastly, before painting, the posts were drilled and tapped. So to start off the paint job, I begin with a coat of German red-brown primer. To get a really worn out looking basic paint job on my truck, I'm going to be using salt chipping. So I've got some water here with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol in it. I'll brush a bit of that on, and then I sprinkle on some salt. This is rock salt that I've crushed up in my pestle and mortar, so I've got various sized granules of it. Here it is after the salt's been applied, and I've let it dry for a little bit. The main colour I'm going to be painting the truck is a light creamy sort of tan. I then spray on a couple of little patches of grey, so they look like patches of primer. And finally a very thin coat of watered down white paint just to help it all look a bit more faded. Next I washed off the salt in some water. See, it's taken off the paint in a couple of places, but it won't matter as I'm going to rust it up quite heavily. So you can see it gives a nice chipped effect to the paint. So now to add some more rust, I've got some paints here. There's a light brown, a burnt umber, some rust effect, some burnt red and some gold paint. I've got a couple of paint brushes here that I've cut in half so that they're a bit more spiky and bristly. Now I'm going to apply the different colours of paint in a sort of stippling fashion, and I use the various different colours, trying to mix them up a bit. And here it is after I've finished. I've gone over the whole truck with the rust there. I think that's starting to look pretty good. Next I painted the windscreen mesh in steel and then rusted that up, and I detailed the rear lights. So here's the interior and the grille and the bed. I want that chrome off of there, so I use some hot water with some caustic soda in it, and here it is after a good rinse. You can see all the chrome has gone off of that. Now I can start painting it. Hit it with some black primer on the ends and grey primer on the interior there. Then I hit the rear there with some steel and the grille with some chrome. And then I detailed the interior and rusted up the bed in the back there. And some rust on the grille there. Here is the base. Now I don't want those horrible purple wheels on it, so I take those out. And I've got my 3 pieces here. Just going to assemble them. Next I added some more rust into the bed there. And then I rusted up the base as well. I've used a fair bit of black paint mixed in with it all, doing the base as well, so it was a bit darker. There we go, and then this was left to dry. And then I applied some silver weathering powder to it to bring out the details. And then I applied a very small amount of weathering powder around the dents on the body of the truck. I fixed all of this with a light coat of matte varnish. So here are those horrible purple wheels. I'm definitely not going to be reusing those. I've got these cool aftermarket ones to replace them. These of course have the white unpainted rims, so I'm going to have to pop the tyres off them and paint them. I start with black undercoat. Next I painted them steel. To weather them, I started with some Tamiya rust weathering powder. This is an oily weathering powder, so it just rubs on and stays on there. Next I applied two different colours of pigment powder. So it was a dark and lighter rust pigments. And this is dry and it doesn't stick at all. So I apply it and then hit it with a light coat of matte varnish, and that's how it comes out. And here are all my weathered rusted wheels with the tyres back on. So I put the wheels into the truck. That's starting to come together. Now I need something in the back of it just to make it a bit more interesting, so I'm going to do some old gasoline drums and some toxic waste drums. So here's some 44-gallon drums and some other smaller ones, I guess they'd be in that scale. I've made the larger ones out of some old Coke cans and the smaller ones are cast. So I start out sticking them on a piece of tape here to hold them, and then give them a light coat of grey primer. I had a few of them with light blue and a couple of them with green there. I printed out some gasoline signs and some biohazard signs. I cut these out and stick them onto my little barrels with some watered down PVA glue, and then I hit them all with a really light watered down coat of white paint so they look a little bit faded. Next I'm going to add some rust to them, so I've got my little palette of rust colours here, and I'm just going to paint on the rust. So here we go with the rust patches painted on to all of our drums there. Still looking a little bit too clean, I think. So I'm going to add some more weathering. Just got some pigment powder here and I've watered it down. Then I brush a little bit on and then rub it off again with my finger. It sort of stains it and it leaves it a little bit grubby looking. And then once all of my drums are nice and grubby and weathered and rusted, I can arrange them in the back of my truck. These were glued into place with a little bit of PVA glue. And finally, just to finish it off, I'm going to put a tarpaulin in the back. So I've got a little piece of tissue here. I'm just going to carefully fold it up a little bit and position it in the back of my truck. And then I wet it into place with some watered down PVA glue. I'm being careful not to rip the tissue, trying to make it lie like an old tarpaulin might. There we go, and this was left to dry well, and then I painted it green. So there we have it. There is our little post-apocalyptic Chevy truck loaded up with old rusty drums. So just before we take a look at the finished project, let's just take a moment to look back and be reminded of what we started with. Here's our half cool, half gaudy looking custom 62 Chevy truck. It'd probably be cool with some nicer wheels and a clear windscreen, but we're going to be taking it to the apocalypse. And here it is, our finished custom 62 Chevy. It's been heavily rusted up. It's had that horrible old windscreen removed and replaced with some mesh. The metallic purple wheels have been replaced with some much more realistic looking aftermarket ones with rubber tyres, even though the rims have been weathered up to look pretty rusty. And of course it's been loaded up on the back there with some old rusty drums of gasoline and some sort of weird toxic waste. So I'm really pleased with how this came out. As you probably know, I really enjoy rusting up cars. You can let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Thanks heaps for supporting the channel. Extra special thanks as always to my awesome Patreon supporters. If you'd like to join them and help out a bit, you can check out my Patreon page. There's a link in the description down below. Thanks heaps for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, if you'd like to see more similar stuff, remember to subscribe and click the bell so that you get notifications. Give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.